In our industry, like many others, the pressure to move faster has never been greater. New technologies like artificial intelligence promise greater efficiencies, but they also raise new questions about trust, collaboration, and how we make good decisions. As organizations race to keep pace with change, perhaps the real challenge isn't simply moving faster, but knowing when it's worth slowing down. This is In Plain Sight, a podcast exploring the biggest questions and trends facing medical publication and communication professionals. I'm your host, Rob Matthias, President and CEO of ISMAP. Today, we're joined by leadership coach Michael Siller. Together, we'll explore why slowing down can actually help organizations move faster and how leaders can navigate complexity without sacrificing rigor or trust. Let's get into it.
We were really pleased to have you join us for our keynote presentation at our European meeting of ISMAP in 2026. And I just wanted to take some time and chat with you today about some of the topics that you had covered over during the meeting.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Rob, for having me here on this podcast. And obviously very happy to dive back into the whole topic, which was very exciting.
Yeah, we were pleased to have you. Your discussion was perfectly timed, I have to say. And it's perfectly timed because when I look at our industry, we're really in a state of times when we're being asked to do things faster and faster and faster, more efficient, do things with less economics and so on and so forth. And at the same time, we're not quite sure how to get that done. We have this pressure happening. So I felt we could just start by talking about that paradox there and how that actually fits together. How do we speed up and slow down at the same time?
I mean, it's on the one side, like the call for more efficiency, for more productivity. And on the other side, also about like academic rigor. It's in itself a paradox. And so if we try to find a solution to solve, obviously, this, to find new ways of dealing with that, then the way to go is at first we need to slow down. We need to slow down to be able to reflect, really figure out, okay, what is actually the problem that we're trying to solve here? For example, like AI is revolutionizing the whole way how we're working. We're trying to keep working the same ways with the same assumptions about work and without ever questioning ourselves how we should be doing that. In history, we had to slow down before in order to be able to speed up. Like, for example, when the railroad track came into place in the UK, and all of a sudden we had to synchronize the watches because every single town had their own time zone, basically based on their own sundial. And so like you have differences between London and Plymouth for about like 10 to 15 minutes. And if you have one single railroad track, then obviously this heads towards a catastrophic collision if you don't synchronize the time. That's why it's about slowing down in order to speed up. And that's somehow the same way we need to deal with those organizations.
So it sounds as though, and we represent publication, medical communication professionals largely, who are really just trying to get medical science into the hands of healthcare decision makers. And they're being asked to speed up. They're being asked to be more efficient, to make sure that medical evidence is in the hands of stakeholders as quickly as possible. But what I hear you saying is that if we're not careful about doing that, then there could be some misses. For example, not synchronizing watches could create a disaster down the road, perhaps not thinking about other stakeholders. Trust, as you mentioned, responsibility, I think could have almost disastrous results.
Yes, I mean, if you just put more pressure on people in solving this issue, applying AI, then we sometimes totally miss the point. Because sometimes we feel like, oh, people are not applying this, they're not trying hard enough, we need to get different people in. Probably they are already trying as hard as possible. I think like the underlying human dimensions are we need to take into consideration. But basically what we, in most of the places, asking people to do is reduce the workforce or reduce work for people like them. So the work that they love doing and what they are the experts in, what they've been trained to be doing, they need to start reducing that. And that's some kind of fear, obviously, that comes up. It was holding back because they knew if they learn how to imply this very fast, they're actually cutting their own jobs. And if we don't address this kind of issue and learn how to upskill the people and help them to redefine their own roles in the organization, which is changing as well, which has to do also with their own identity, then we will not get this kind of commitment to imply this into their organization and into their own roles. And so there's a like big job for HR, but also for leaders to foster this kind of transformation, which has not just to do with like bringing in new software and just apply this and do this faster and so on. But no, it's just a whole new way of thinking about the roles that they were doing, to have always like the human in the loop with the AI, but which obviously also changes the whole role in which they are then working in.
Yeah, very good points. I speak to a lot of our publication and medical communication professionals. And what I hear from them as a general use case is, Rob, I've been told just to make sure I put AI into my goals and objectives. Rob, I've been told this year I have to somehow use AI without a lot of direction, with a lot of strategic thought, without a lot of training, upskilling, as you'd mentioned before. And it sounds like that could lead us down a dangerous path if we're just telling people to go march in a certain direction without giving them scaffolding to help them get there. Do you see that across the industry, and you think that's a potential problem within our publication space?
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that point. It's so new, and so a lot of people just don't have a clue how to implement it, how to bring it into the organization. And I guess like in all of the industries out there, there's still a big uncertainty on how to make this really profitable. And you're totally right about like, they're just throwing it in there. Obviously not all of them, but a lot of organizations, they just say like, yeah, use AI. And every different kind of department uses it differently. They don't have any kind of standards that are synchronized yet, or no big alignment on this. And so you create in different kind of departments their own bubble, where they are using it in a certain way, and another department in a different way. And so where not much learning happens between them. And also, where they basically develop their own system and how to use it, but that can lead to more friction than actually it helps to develop the organization.
Yeah, and talk about repeating the past, right? I mean, we see this happen in our industry over and over and over again, where you have different sides of different organizations trying to adopt different new technologies, and they're doing it in silos. And so, I mean, we have a common effect where, we'll have some of our pharmaceutical companies that will be implementing different aspects of technology in different ways across two different departments that sit 2 rows apart within an office building. So with that type of thing happening, it's very possible that we have inefficiencies, despite the fact that our achievement or what we're going for is more efficiency to begin with.
And therefore, my call again for slowing down to speed up is because in the first moment, you need to slow down. You need to bring the people together to agree on certain aspects and how to move forward, how to make sure that you keep learning and keep developing this forward. And if you don't slow down in these moments, then everyone's just like getting more busy, but not getting more effective. And if you slow down in these kind of moments, then you can have like a strategic advantage.
Yeah. It makes good sense. But I'm going to ask you the hard question. Is there a way to do both? Is there a way to slow down and speed up? Because our folks are being asked to at least appear as though they're speeding up. And even if they're not necessarily speeding up while they're slowing down, is there a middle point, do you think, that they can achieve?
I think that aspect about slowing down is already speeding up. Mm. And that's somehow the confusion in our thinking sometimes. Because very often we think more is more, and more is more, and more is more. Like if we keep working harder and more hours, we feel like that is more, we're becoming more productive. But we know that if we push performance to a certain kind of point where we go into more stress and more burnout, then people all of a sudden are out for months, and they won't be able to do any kind of work. And so by taking their step back already to look more at your own resilience and building that up helps you already to solve more complex problems. I really strongly encourage organizations to really slow down and create these kind of safety zones where people know that they can take a step back because they know and they're aware of it, that leads to better problem solving. Then that's the slow down that actually speeds you up already.
So, what's interesting about that, Michael, is that it leads us into a conversation on metrics, right? Because at the end of the day, our folks are being measured on productivity. So how many abstracts did you produce? How many manuscripts did you produce? I think I can gather from our discussion is that it may not just be a quantification at the end of the day, or did I use AI in the generation of my manuscript, but it's, did I find a more responsible way to do it? Did I find a way that down the road isn't going to create a compliance concern? And perhaps there's ways that we could build those measurement tools into our objectives and make those accessible with our leadership. Is that kind of the direction you're going with this?
I definitely think so. I totally agree with you, because if down the road you produced more papers than was requested, but actually they don't apply to the academic rigor, then what are they good for? I mean, it's really if you cannot use them, then the trust is the key point there, and therefore it's important for you to look at that aspect, that even with applying all the AI and being as fast as possible, you still need to adhere to your ethical standards, to the academic standard that are necessary.
It's funny to hear you say that, because I think most people, when they think about artificial intelligence and other digital achievements, are thinking, gosh, this multiplier is going to help me do so much more, so much faster, so much more efficiently. But if we get it wrong and we have an error in the sprocket somewhere, we're also going to multiply that error or that inaccuracy a lot more quickly than we could have in the past.
Exactly, yes.
We certainly work in a profession where these are dynamics that we face every day. So on a regular basis, we're being asked to consider new products, new different technologies that come our way as publication, medical communication professionals. We work in an industry where we have obviously our industry partners, and we have our agency partners, and we work with publishers and academia and so on. And everybody seems to have a different way that they want to go about getting medical science into the community. And I think sometimes our professionals are really challenged to make hard decisions to determine, we have shiny new toys that come along almost every day. And do you have any advice when our folks are contemplating new toys as to how they might look at them for utilization and ultimate impact?
Yes, if there's so much noise there, it draws away from the focus. And focus is one of our key elements on how we can drive productivity. If we can work focused on one aspect, no extraordinary amount of time, like the aspect about like deep work, like work for 90 minutes, for example, on one thing, gets us just way more, makes us way more productive and also fulfilled. It's not just that we're more productive, but we also feel more fulfilled if we can work in a focused way on something. There's been a research out last year that I think it was in Germany, or it was all over Europe, that we are interrupted in the workspace every 4 minutes. We get an interruption, some kind of ping, some kind of email, some kind of call that comes in. And we know that we need 7 to 10 minutes to dive deep in to become productive what we're doing. Now, if we're distracted every 4 minutes, how can we get to that point where we are productive? So adding more shiny toys to that distracts us more from becoming focused, and adds more stress and more noise to what we're doing. And therefore, slowing down to reduce this kind of stress helps us, reduce this kind of noise, helps us to focus and be more productive. And also implement AI more where it's necessary and where it's really useful.
Yeah, that's a great point. The only thing is I would disagree with some of that research. In the course of this 15 minutes we've been recording, I probably got pinged about 20 times, I think. So I think it's certainly a busy time for us.
Yeah.
Parts. So I'm going to completely switch gears on you, Michael. And Tetralemma, you had introduced us to Tetralemma in Europe. And for those that weren't there with us, can you tell us about what this is, what it means, and we can try to apply it to what our folks do for a living here?
Of course. Very often in organizations, when it's about making a decision, where it's about like speed versus academic rigor, we find ourselves within the polarities of a paradox, and where we think we need to decide for one over the other, like either speed or academic rigor. And also when we're under stress, we very often are put on these blinders, like our stress mode focuses our view, and we think about like black and white, all or nothing. That very often with AI is also the case. We trust it or we don't trust it. Now the Tetralemma is a tool that comes from the systemic consulting, and was developed by Matthias Varga from Keybat, which forces you a way to look beyond this dilemma and gets it in a tetralemma. Basically, it opens up 2 more fields. One field would be the both and. So you have like this, which could be the speed versus the academic rigor. And it immediately asks you also to think about the both and. And what could the both and be? Yes, it's basically what we blind out, what we don't look at when we have a discussion, but like an argument. I said like, no, it's all about speed. And you might say, no, it's all about academic rigor. And we get into this fight, which becomes more about like a heated conflict between the two of us. And we blind out the aspect that might be both and in this. And then there's even a fourth field. And this fourth field is called the neither nor. And we need to think about this neither nor field as a solution that can come to us when we think about in which context does this problem show up? Because every kind of problem just shows up in certain kind of contexts. In certain other contexts, it doesn't show up, right? For example, if you would just think about speed and academic rigor, and so it's on the one side, we need to get more publications out, and the other is it needs to be academic with the rigor that's necessary. Sometimes you forget, maybe we need to bring in some other person from the organization in order to be able to solve this. Let's bring in finance people, or let's bring more investors in. Maybe we can get more people so that we can have both and, right? And so this helps you to think outside of your box beyond the dilemma, which would be this or the other, towards the both and also the neither nor.
I think you're really speaking to the heart of our listeners who are sitting there thinking, well, how does this apply? But every day we're trying to make decisions that seem as though they're either or, A or B. And what I hear you saying is, well, maybe there's some other options. On a day-to-day basis, our folks are being asked to decide, should we rush that out to a medical congress? Or should we slow down a bit and hold it off and make sure we get into a top-tier publication, peer-reviewed publication down the road? Now, not in every scenario is it possible for us to be able to do one or the other or both or neither, but it certainly does open us up to think about, well, are there other stakeholders that maybe we should be asking about this? Or are there other folks that we should be thinking about? And are we thinking way outside the box, beyond our own organizations and the outside community? And I hear the tetralemma mindset telling us to really just try to open our field of consideration.
Yes. I mean, we're always talking here about a complex topic. We're in a complex field. And so sometimes it helps us to get better solutions if we draw the circle smaller about stakeholders or about timelines, or sometimes it's we draw it bigger. Very often we just talk about facts and figures and bring all the content in there and have dialogues about that. But we forget very often the social aspects, right? So we're sitting in a room together and there's, the big CEO, and it's this is going to be the solution. We're going to be doing this. And everyone else shuts up. No one says what they're actually thinking about. So there's just a this, but the other is not even there because no one is okay saying that. No one feels the psychological safety in the room to be able to voice that. And so therefore, you need to develop and figure out different kind of strategies, how you can bring also maybe this opposing idea into play to be able to bring them and your solution to the table. Because if no one opposes it, it means also that everyone nods in the room, but at the end of the day, there's no commitment to follow through.
Yeah, they're all very fair points. So, as we're chatting here, I'm thinking to myself, a lot of people are listening to this and thinking, well, this is good, Rob. This is all well and good when you join the conversation. But you got to ask them about AI. You got to have them deep dive in AI. And I don't know that we're going to get into that necessarily fully today. But my question for you is, and I think if I remember correctly, we had talked a little bit about Theory U at our London meeting. And I just wanted to see if you wanted to help us understand that theory and how it may apply to AI for our publication professionals.
Okay, for sure. Theory U was developed by Klaus Otto Scharmer, a senior scientist at MIT. And basically, already years ago with the beginning of the digitalization, he realized that we are constantly, collectively producing results that actually nobody wants, right? You're looking at the world right now, you see polarizations that are just increasing from time to time. We have more wars now than we have before. And still somehow it looks like we're not getting smarter. We're not learning from the past. That learning from the past is not good enough anymore. And so basically he developed a process on how to start looking differently at it. And basically he said, there's this mode on seeing and paying attention to the world, which he calls downloading, is meaning looking at the world with our own old patterns, using strategies from yesterday to trying to solve problems of today or tomorrow. And that's something we need to let go at first. Let go of that and be able to see things with fresh eyes. And then probably also redirect our view into what we have not paid attention to. And that could be also the both and solution or the neither nor, right? And then he calls something as presencing. Because in his point of view, basically we have lost a lot of contact with ourselves, with our physical being, and we just try to solve everything with our brains. You and I were constantly working together with lots of smart people, and so like the brain is very important, obviously, but there's just more to that. And having this connection also to our physical selves and to also Mother Earth helps us to develop new ideas, new solutions that he calls then crystallizing, that you let them come, let them emerge, and they then become new prototypes. And so therefore, what it would mean also for publication professionals is, letting go of the way how it has been done yesterday. Not to think like, okay, we've done it always that way, and now we just put a patch AI on top and it's going to be better. Right? You need to develop a new way of how you work together or how you work at all. It's like the human plus AI becomes better AI, or AI plus human becomes also better or more efficient human. But what does this exactly mean? How do we need to relate as human beings to that in order that something greater can come out? Again, the slowing down process in order to be able to figure out the meaning, the way of how to relate to that we can trust. What can we trust? What do we need to have pay highly attention to in order to be able to cooperate very well together? And that's like a slow process, but it's definitely very fruitful and helps us to move forward to generate collectively more solutions that help us to have more what we want and less what we don't want.
Yeah, it's such an interesting way for us to bring this around full circle, Michael. Because, we started this conversation around slowing down, and now here we are talking about kind of putting a Band-Aid or a patch of AI, being asked to do this at a very rapid rate and by our leadership. And then at the same time saying, well, nobody's really taking a step back and asking, do we have trust? And have we looked at the ecosystem? Have we changed the way in which we do things to accommodate AI? Instead, we're doing Band-Aids and patches and just trying to move forward. If I can take away a central message, which I think I hear you saying, is to speed up really does mean to slow down a bit, get the ecosystem straightened out, understand what your objectives are, and then purposely move forward once you understand the environment you're working in and what you're trying to achieve. That sounds accurate to you.
And we should never forget this is an iterative process. It's nothing that we put a 5 years plan down. It's like, okay, now solve's done. No, it's something that we need to develop and to co-create together. And therefore, it's very important to have always like a very participatory design for any kind of change process that you're trying to implement, where you bring all the different kind of stakeholders to the table and develop this together. So it's a big challenge for leadership, because all of a sudden you need to really let go of certain kind of levels of controls and practice this kind of shifts that I talked about in my keynote as well, to move from the expert to the explorer, where you, obviously all the people like we were talking to were like experts. They hired as experts, they're getting paid as experts, they were trained as experts. But being an expert alone in itself is not good enough anymore. You need to become also the explorer, where you let go of your own truth from the past and explore the not knowing, what's out there.
That's all for today. Thank you all for listening. Please take a minute to subscribe to In Plain Sight on your favorite podcast app. Share with your colleagues and rate our show highly if you liked what you heard today. In Plain Sight is a production of ISMAP, the International Society for Medical Publication Professionals. Our production partner is Citizen Racecar. Our producer and editor is Hajar Eldas. Post-production by Alex Brower. Publication and promotion by Candice Chantalou. To join ISMAP today, go to ismap.org. Becoming a member means you can participate in value-packed webinars and receive instant access to exclusive tools and resources. If you're interested, just go to ismap.org, that's ismpp.org, to learn more.